Hey guys, turning this up. Just 12 o'clock, but I see people clicking in, so I'm going to give it a few seconds. Get settled. For those who are already here, welcome. But also, call myself exercising, doing the right thing. Went out yesterday to do a walk around the park, and I now have had an allergy attack. So I will sound weird and probably have a runny nose throughout. I'll try not to be gross about it, but it's where we're at. There's also construction going on outside. Happy holidays. And I'm going to have music up because it's my webinar. Holiday music I've been listening to. So I see a few more people clicking in. Just kind of giving you some background. So what this is every month I'm hosting a webinar to get like-minded people together and really be thinking about the work that we're doing and how we're doing it, challenges. You know, there's so much out there around being the change. And so my goal is to help us, me included, figure out how do we do that? Everyone says be the change that you want to see. Start the business, start the nonprofit, start the whatever. So whatever that means, how do we go about actually executing that is really what my focus is on. As far as who I am, I'm an attorney by trade, but I have veered from that path a little bit. And so I tell people I now help folks use their superpowers to create the worlds they want to live in. And I do that by creating community and giving tools and resources and education and legal advice and business and strategy and all that to help them execute on their vision. So figuring out what does it look like and then actually executing on it rather than just telling you do it. And today, the theme that I wanted to do around this was getting unstuck. It's something that a lot of us have been talking about. It's come up several times, you know, from people that I've been speaking with. I had a train of thought and I lost it. But yes, getting unstuck. It's something that we also have been talking about in the AE community, Angel Entrepreneurs. What is that? I am so glad you asked. It is a community that I'm beta testing of executive directors and founders and technologists and institutions and whomever is doing good for us to do it together and have a community so that when we talk about doing things differently, we don't have people looking at us funny and pushing some of the same super hyper, I'm going to say it, masculine ways of doing business that we typically hear about. So join the AE community. You can find that on my website, ErinEMcClaretyPLLC.com. And so as far as getting unstuck, what does that look like? I'm going to really just talk about different ways you can know that you're stuck. I'm sure you know that you're stuck if you're here, but different ways that it can manifest, how we can diagnose it, exercises that we can use, and then tools and books that you might want to read to help with whatever it is that you're feeling stuck in. So just going to go ahead and get started there. I also will be taking questions. I see a few have already popped up. So if you are, if you have any questions or want to talk about anything, please feel free to send something through. So how do I know that I'm stuck? Or what is one way that being stuck manifests itself? It manifests itself really when we're too ephemeral. And by that, I mean, we feel like we're in the cloud. Everything, you know, it's not really tangible for us. We're not entirely clear on what the heck we're doing. We just know that we want to do something. So it's very theoretical. When people, I have a lot of friends, especially who end up being in the legal and other professions, who just are really heady and they think a lot. And so ephemeral is a place they tend to find themselves when they're stuck. It's just that they're really stuck in their head. They're reading all the case studies and they're looking at all the research and they're looking at all the frameworks and different things that are research oriented, but that's kind of where it's sitting. So an exercise or exercises here that I find helpful is just really grounding and understanding how do you translate what it is that you have going on in your head to what it is that you're trying to execute in the world. Some of this may tie to clarity too, which we're going to talk about in a few moments. But And tools, in terms of a tool, ethnography and other tools that get you out into the field. And so ethnography is essentially, I am following, I am researching with, I am co-creating with whomever my audience is. IDEO, if you're familiar with them, they do a lot of design service workshops and things, and they're known for a lot of their design service work in the impact space. They're known for this practice. So I was reading an article or a book where they said that the IDEO folks were working in a hospital, and they actually checked themselves into the hospital and sat in the bed for several hours and experienced what the hospital folks in the hospital would have experienced. And in that discovery, they found I'm looking at concrete when I'm sitting in the hospital bed. I'm staring at a ceiling the entire day. And so from that, the nurses learned maybe we should paint the ceilings. And they did. Maybe we should plant trees and have gardens and different things. And so, but that came from living the experience of their audience. So if you find you're being heady, IDEO could have totally said, okay, what does the research say? What does it say in terms of patient experience? What are the surveys saying? What they could have totally from their office addressed that, but rather they got into the field and experienced it for themselves. They talked to people, they sat with people, and from there came up with a solution that took them out of their heads and into a solution that really resonated with the hospital patients there. So that's one way of getting unstuck, is to just get out there in the field and experience what it is that you are expecting or wanting your audience or clients to experience. Another way that people get stuck is they have a fear of failure. Us perfectionists tend to get stuck in that one where, and it may not even be something that we're conscientious of or call, but we just keep perfecting and adding and changing and tweaking and messing with things. And we don't actually push it out. And a lot of times that could be symptomatic of being afraid that it's actually going to fail and not wanting to fail. And what's the best way not to fail? Not to do it. So if this is the case, Tim Ferriss has a TED Talk that he did. I don't often refer to him. I don't have a problem with him, but I don't often refer to him. But he does have a TED Talk on fear setting. And essentially what this is the acknowledgement that a lot of the fear, the reason why it freaks us out so badly is we don't know what to expect. There's just this chaos and this black hole, and we do a worst case scenario play out in our heads. And so what fear setting does is it's one, let's identify what the fears are. So rather than having this boding, terrible feeling, let's actually identify what is it that we're afraid of? What is it that we can do to prevent that? Are there mechanisms and different things that we can put in place to try to prevent that failure from happening? If it happens, what's the worst case and how can we repair from that? And, I was a little skeptical, but did this myself. And you would be really surprised how much better it feels if you can have a handle on exactly what it is that you're afraid of. So if you find yourself stuck and not moving because you think it's a fear of failure, just get really comfortable with what is the failure. And I'm not saying comfortable, like snuggle with it, love it. I'm not one of those, love failure, it's the best thing in the world. I think that's BS, because for most of us when we're going through it, it does not feel that way. However, I do think that we assign it more power than it has to have simply because we don't understand what it is. So if you find that you may be afraid, really get in touch with what is it that you're afraid of? Is it that no one's going to watch? Is it that no one's going to purchase? Is it that the product itself is not going to work? Is it that the campaign, is something going to happen with the campaign? Get really conscientious of what that is, and then start seeing what you can do to plan and then repair if it does actually happen. The next reason people tend to get stuck is clarity. They don't have any clarity. So you're meandering. You don't really feel anchored in anything, and you're doing. I think this is really prevalent in our current culture because there's this huge push for productivity. Be productive for 28 hours of the day. Yes, I know there are not 28 hours, but be productive for 28 hours and push, do as much as you can. And as a result of that, we are so quick to get out and do the thing that we don't think about what is it that I'm trying to do. And so we just do with no clarity. Actually, one of my yoga teachers, I was laughing in him because he would say, we do, and it's do as a result, which I think is pretty accurate. So in terms of exercises that you can do to get yourself unstuck from this, really be thinking about what is the ideal. And when I say ideal, perfect example, I'll talk to nonprofit directors who are starting a new campaign or really just starting anew with their organization in general in terms of programming. And they may say, I want to have X number of people come in, or I want to raise X number of dollars. But why is it that you're raising that? Are you just raising money for the sake of raising money? Which in the case of nonprofits, I'm not saying that money is I understand that you would want to raise money for the sake of raising money. But if you don't have clarity around it, I guarantee you that is emanating out into everything else you're doing. And so when you're communicating about it, when you're taking actions and decisions on it, you're taking haphazard actions and decisions. And when you're communicating on it, you're communicating on it in a way that isn't engaging. And similarly, isn't clear to the people that you're talking to. And then when you're taking next steps, the next steps are all over the place because you don't have a true North Star in terms of where you're trying to go. So come up with the ideal. If we're talking about, I want my program to run this way, pick a day. What does that program look like on that day? And I want it to be as specific as possible. Who all is there? What all are they doing? Where are they doing it at? What does it look like? What are they getting out of it? What feelings are they experiencing? What do they go tell their friends? Really get clear on what all of that is. And I guarantee you, as you start moving forward and making decisions, you're going to start to get a little bit steadier and anchor in terms of what those decisions are. Or you're going to move because you'll be so excited about that vision. Because it's one thing to say, I want to start a volunteer program. Okay. It's another thing to say, I want to start a volunteer program that allows our volunteers to see the day-to-day trials and tribulations and empathize with the folks that we're working with, to better understand the conditions in which we're operating in, to get them excited and have them get engaged with our organization and make them more inclined to give their talents and time and research. The more clear I can get on why it is I'm doing that thing, the more excited I can get. Because I'm not going to be excited about volunteers just showing up, but I am going to be excited about my volunteers showing up and seeing just why it is that this work matters so much to me and the people that I'm working with and the amazing things that they're doing, right? So if you're stuck, it may be clarity. It may be you're just not clear on what it is that you're trying to do, and so you need to get clarity around that. One tool that helps with that is the visualization I was talking about. So sitting back and really thinking about it. I know it seems foo-foo and hippy-dippy, but I promise you, when you go to all the big business and tech conferences, they may not use the word visualization, but they're talking about visualization. It's incredibly powerful. So do that. A book that you may want to read is A More Beautiful Question. And I know that it's interesting. Why would I want to read a book on questions when I want to get clarity? A More Beautiful Question is an amazing book about why it is as adults we don't ask questions more and how we can get better at asking questions using the why, how, what framework. It's really revolutionized the way that I'm doing things. But I find I can figure out where my lack of clarity is quicker if I'm asking myself questions and identifying what it is that I don't know or what it is I'm trying to get to. So you'll see as you read the book, it may not make sense to ask questions to get to the clarity, but you don't get to clarity without asking questions. And I think something that he points out that's really relevant is we are an answer society. We're way too focused on answers. The thing is, answers are in this nice, nifty computer that we have, millions and gajillions of them. We don't need to have the answers. We need to understand the questions. And I just realized, actually, fear of failure, I skipped the book and the tool. So going back in terms of if fear of failure is the thing that's keeping you stuck, rapid prototyping, I find, is the best way, the best tool. And so that's really coming up with your they say minimum viable product, but just coming up with something and putting it out there. Fighting the perfectionism, finding just little things that you can put out there, caveating them. My little perfectionist sometimes would say, hey guys, or y'all, I'm putting this out here. It's a running draft. I'm not comfortable with it, but I want to get feedback. So just caveating it. Get things out there as quickly as possible, and you'll get more and more comfortable with doing it. But not only that, you're going to get feedback that's going to be invaluable, and you're going to move quicker because you're moving through and getting that information back, and it's feeding what you're doing, and you're not necessarily just sitting in your head thinking about worst case. The book to read if fear of failures. This is not clarity. Fear of failure is the reason why you may be stuck. Is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. This is on my want to read list. I've only dabbled in it a few times, but I know that it's a biggie for a lot of people because, again, as a society, we talk a lot about don't be afraid, no fear, go for it. That is bull. Of course you're afraid. We were programmed to be afraid when we had lions chasing us across the savannas. So it makes complete sense to be afraid when we're undergoing a new campaign or capital campaign or project of business. What we do need to manage is how we deal with that fear, because fear also can be an indication that we may be going in the wrong direction. So it's being able to tap into the fear and understand, is this just a fear of failure? Is it a fear of the unknown? Or is this something intuitively telling me that I may not be going in the right direction? So that clarity, the tool is visualization, the book, A More Beautiful Question. Next, one reason you may be getting stuck is you're not passionate. You've made what it is that you're working on compulsory. I see this a lot in the business space, and even I would say in the nonprofit space, because we get a lot of shoulds. Executive directors should be doing this. Nonprofits who are in this space should be doing that. And they should do a capital campaign. They should be doing a gala or a golf event. Or businesses should be manifesting in this way. Shoulds are the worst. But if it's compulsory, the way you can figure out if this is where you're at is you've got an idea, you know what direction you want to go in, you're even good at taking the steps. The fact is you just don't want to do it. And getting you to move forward with it is like pulling teeth. If you moving forward is like pulling teeth, then not being passionate about it and it being compulsory may be what you're suffering from. An exercise that I do, because for me, social media, believe it or not, is I would rather pluck my teeth out one by one. I cannot stand doing social media, which may surprise some of you because you see me on there a little bit more than not. But I cannot stand it. And the way that I got better at it was reframing. So the tool here is going to be a values assessment. I sat down and thought, okay, what are the things that are important to me? What is it that I'm trying to communicate? What is the impact that I'm trying to have through the work that I do? Some of the things I came up with was storytelling. I want to tell the story about you guys and the innovative and amazing things that you're doing. I want to be able to make you feel comfortable, because I feel like so much of the material out there is just, go, push, exploit. And I wanted to create a space for people to do things differently, right? And do things thinking about the holistic and not necessarily just thinking about themselves. And I wanted to do it in a way that's accessible and engaging. And so, I forget what my values list was, but just came up with a list of values and things that are important to me: engaging, being accessible. I want to be able to educate. I want to be able to make people feel like they belong. I want to help them execute on their visions. I want to storytell. And then I reframe the things that I can't stand, but know I have to do based on that. So the key here is, once you've listed the things that you love to do and the things that matter to you and your values, then you've got a list of things that suck and you cannot stand, and or you just don't want to do. And then looking at that list, is there something that we can chunk? Now, when you're startup and you've got small resources, I understand. I am there. It's really difficult to just delegate to someone, because use it. But there may be a freelancer, or there may be an opportunity to hire someone to do a couple of social media posts or whatever the case may be. So do that. If you cannot, reframe. So I took, for example, my newsletter, which I was stalling on religiously putting together a newsletter. And I said, how can I reframe this? So what I started doing is you'll notice if you get it, which if you aren't, you should be. At the very top, typically I'll have a Q&A with a client or someone that I've worked with, telling their story about how they're having impact in the world. And that to me matters a lot. I started including tools and resources. So I got away from what everyone else told me I should be doing with my newsletter. And I started really focusing on what tools are clients asking about, what kind of resources, books, templates, frameworks would they find helpful? Can I do it in a way with GIFs and really funny pictures that lightens it up for people so it's not this big drudgery? I took all those values, being engaging and storytelling and helping you execute, and I put that into the work that I was doing with my newsletter. And I kept that in mind as I was doing my newsletter. So the process that I take in doing it is to actually pay attention to, is this engaging? Is this educating? Is this me being too theory related? Or is this something that I feel I should include? And even the way I go about doing my newsletter is different. So rather than just sitting down and saying, okay, got to do my newsletter, as I'm reading case studies and finding opportunities and getting excited, I keep a running list in my Evernote and I just pluck it there. So by the time I get to the end of the month, I already have several resources and grants and opportunities that I've come across in all the work that I've done that I can just plug into my newsletter. So totally different way, reframed, of how I'm approaching something that I just typically would get really stuck on. And you guys would get newsletters like every 3 months. So the tool here is values assessment. Sit down, think about what it is that matters to you or your team, your organization, your business. Look at the things that you do love doing as a team, business owner, executive director. Then look at, what is it that I'm getting stuck on? Is there a way to reframe? Well, one, is there a way to chunk it? And if there's not a way to chunk it, is there a way to reframe it in a way that is engaging, that I like, a list of the things that I like, or that aligns with my values and something that I can get really excited about? Next, shame or worthiness, which may be a really weird one to bring up here. But if you find you start to think about your project, it's like, who do I think I am? What do I think? Who do I think we are? We're too small for this. This doesn't make sense. People are going to think we're stupid. They're going to think we're nuts. We can't do something like this. If the gremlins start up, that's probably a shame-worthiness thing, which I'm talking more and more about because I'm seeing it in so many of my clients. And I definitely have to be careful with the language that I use, because not everyone, you mention shame and they're like, what are you talking about? But here, just fundamentally talking about whether or not you fully and inherently believe that you or your organization has the capacities to do it, right? And who of us don't? And so if this is something that you're experiencing with your projects, if when you're starting your projects up, you or the team have these gremlins and all these shoulds and can'ts and who are we and who do we think we are, then a great exercise that I use is understanding the narrative. So really, what is the narrative? Put a light on the voices. If the voices are saying things, maybe write them out. Maybe kind of like the fear setting I was talking about. Can we get a handle on what it is that we're telling ourselves in the loops? And then I saw a really good exercise in this magazine, and I can't remember the name of it, but it also said, take it a step further and assign where did that narrative come from? Because I find more often than not, the narratives that I repeat to myself do not come from me. They come from other people or society, or again, the Gary V's and such of the world that have told me that I needed to do something a very specific way. Really prevalent in the nonprofit world, where a lot of people feel like it should be in these specific boxes. And so you may say special events are the thing, but do you really believe that? Or is that because everyone traditionally has said that special events has to be a thing for nonprofits? Understand the narrative. What's going on in your head? What are the gremlins saying? Maybe even understand where did the gremlins coming from? Is that something parents said? Is it something coworkers said? Competitors said? Is it something society is telling you? And then in terms of the tool, so many of you who know me know I am a huge Brene Brown fan. We're besties and she doesn't know it yet. She's here in Houston and I've seen her a few times. And so I get to call that. But she has a couple books, all of which I have. 2 that are really great here are Daring Greatly, which is basically kind of a flesh out of her TED Talk that's had millions and millions and millions of views. If you've not watched that TED Talk, watch the TED Talk. It quite literally is one of the most watched TED Talks in history. It's got millions and millions of views. And then she did a follow-up to Daring Greatly. So what happens if we dare greatly and we fall flat on our face, which often happens? And that was called Rising Strong. And in Rising Strong, she talks about this framework, which is where the exercise comes from, around the reckoning. And so here we are articulating the feelings, recognizing the emotional factors, what's going in, the reaction, and then getting curious. So it sounds more woo-woo-y than it actually is. Again, if you read a lot of the business texts, they're talking about this. They're just using different language. But, if you find when you're starting a project, you get anxiety, you get angry, you get trepidatious, there's something triggering that. So one is just acknowledging. Whenever I think of this project, my face flushes. I get this pain in my chest or my shoulder. I get really anxious, or I get really agitated when I'm talking to my team about this project, or I start to snap at them when I'm talking about this project. I had a coworker who she was working on something that was major, that was triggering some major imposter syndrome stuff for her. And I would notice when we had team meetings, if you asked a question, she was on you. And I think a lot of that was just that imposter syndrome was showing up so much that she didn't want to be questioned at risk of not knowing the answer and then proving to herself you weren't supposed to be doing this to begin with. So get curious. Do you snap at your team? Do you snap at your partner when you're talking about whatever it is that you're working on? No, first identify the feeling, then get curious. Why is that? Or I don't like why. What's happening? And the reason I don't like asking why is almost kind of a who are you question. Like, why would you be feeling upset? But why wouldn't you be feeling upset? So I don't like that. So maybe ask yourself, what is it that I'm experiencing? What is it that I'm telling myself? How is this manifesting? How is it, and how is this impacting me? But get really curious about what's going on. And watch for the barriers that you may be putting up. So you may make yourself really recluse and you may not talk to your team. You may pretend like everything is totally fine when it's not, or you may just blow up at the slightest provocation because and that's your way of pushing people away so that you don't have to deal with what's going on. So if you're getting stuck in a project and you're hearing the gremlins, it's likely shame or worthiness that's coming up. And so the tool is The Reckoning from her book, Brene Brown's book, the Rising Strong. And also read Daring Greatly if you haven't read Daring Greatly. Next one, decorating the tree. I just heard this recently and I was like, oh, I love this because it's the holiday times. And what she was basically saying is you're doing too much too soon. You're trying to throw it all up at the same time. So if you find yourself exhausted and you're doing a million different things at once, which can often happen when we're starting a new project because we're like, oh my God, I cannot wait. I am so excited. This is amazing. And so we develop the concepts and then we develop the product itself or the campaign and then we market it all at the same time. Or roll out 6 projects or 6 products at the same time. You are likely decorating the tree. You're doing too much. So what can you do? Prune the tree. There's been a couple of memes going around about this, but I actually met someone who is an arborist, and we had a very illuminating conversation about the relationship with nature and business. And something she mentioned was, the reason that people prune the trees is because if you want, contrary to convention, having this spread is not good for bearing fruit. If you want really amazing, great produce and fruit in this instance, then you've got to keep the tree fairly pruned so that it's able to concentrate and you don't have the resources spreading all out every which ways, which lowers the quality. And so when you think of that analogously, if you are taking a project or something that a campaign or whatever that you're working on, and you're just throwing everything at it and letting it grow, inherently what you're going to come up with is going to diminish if you don't really burn yourself out altogether. And so some of what may be happening is you're stuck because your body sees that you're about to burn out. And it's just like, whoa, I'm shutting down before this happens. Or the resources are just being spread out way too thin. So it's like, where do I go? Where do I go? What do I do? Where are we? Right? And so prune the tree. A great way for doing this, or in terms of an exercise, is mind mapping. I've been getting really into mind maps. Everyone makes them seem easy. They're not super easy if you're not used to visualizing that way. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. I have an app. Let me look it up real quick for you guys. MindNode, MindNode. Super simple. I don't think it costs that much. There's MindMeister also has an app. And I think if you just do like 2 maps, it's free. But it allows, basically I start with my project and everything needs to happen. This is my dump. I dump everything out, especially everything that I think I need to do. And then I prune from there because it quite literally looks like a tree. And then it's like, okay, can I aggregate this with this? Can I aggregate with this with this? Can I remove this? Can I gray this out because this doesn't really need to be done right now? And so if I have just a big picture visual of what it is that I'm trying to do, then it allows me to pick and choose and say, okay, well, I don't really need to worry about marketing because I don't even know what the heck I'm trying to do right now. So why would I try to be on social media doing a whole bunch of stuff around this? Let me focus on these things, right? So Prune the Tree. And in terms of the book, Lean Impact or Running Lean by Ash Moria. And Eric wrote Lean Impact. You've probably heard of Lean Impact. There is now actually a Lean Impact for Social Change that came out in October. And I've gotten it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm super excited. And so basically it's applying the Lean Impact for Startups methodology to social change and social change initiatives. So check that out if you haven't. But basically the whole book is about how do you get something out there, right? Measure, then make sure that it's basically co-creating, how do you, and this kind of would go up with the rapid prototyping too when you're scared of failure. But this is just a great way to say, let me figure out, let me prune. Okay, let me do this, get my feedback, get my measurements, and then iterate on that and just keep iterating rather than just trying to do everything at once. And I think Running Lean is basically how do you iterate yourself through a project was in the title. So right on point in terms of how do we start something, really get hyper focused about it, and then just keep growing it through next iterations. The woman who started Tushy, which if you haven't seen, they're basically bringing back the bidet in like a very modern way. It's a very interesting case study actually, because they've done it in a very non-traditional way. But she had an article she just wrote about iteration is the key. Just don't sit here and try to be perfect and get clear, do it, and then iterate. And she said that she's got several businesses actually, but she's done that because she's iterated through. She says she hasn't expected that she gets it perfect. She hasn't expected to just do it all at once. She does something and then she just grows it through iteration. So keep that in mind. Last one, because I want to make sure I get you guys out on time. Isolation may be another reason why you're getting stuck. So here, this is a sneaky one because you can be moving along, chugging along, and it may seem like there's nothing going on with you per se, but you may notice that your products or service or your campaign, your donor launch, or whatever the case may be, is not resonating with people the way that you thought it would. So you're stuck simply because nobody's picking it up. Nobody's dealing with it. And if this is the case, it's likely because you've isolated yourself. So it ties a little bit in with being ephemeral. I mentioned that, remember, where you're in your head and you're developing, you're thinking, and the case studies and the frameworks and things, and usually the isolation comes from that. So we've been really ephemeral, and then we close in and we develop something from that. But the problem is we can't move forward because it doesn't really resonate with anyone. It's not activating them. I was actually talking yesterday to my mentor group that I mentor, and one of the case studies we brought up was BlackBerry, who I think perfectly personifies this and got stuck. Was they had an amazing research and development department, and they were years, I feel like, ahead of what Apple and all these other people were doing, but they got stuck. They rested on their laurels and they really stayed insular. They weren't really measuring and getting in touch with what do our clients want? How are they engaging with the products? What's the trend? Because if they saw the trend, they would have seen platforms, which is Apple Store, Google Store, or Google Play Store, whatever it's called. Notice I'm an iPhone person. But they would have seen platforms was the next big thing. And what did they miss? Platforms, right? They missed they basically had an all-in-one before people had an all-in-one, but they missed the platforms. They missed the way that people were engaging with it, that they were breaking down the way. And so we weren't going to be doing whole apps anymore, but that we were going to be modularizing. Anyways, don't get me started on that. But they were in isolation. Exercise, field research. Again, get out, ask people questions, watch. If you are a nonprofit, how do people engage with your demographic? What news are they taking in? Who are they talking to? How are they formulating their opinions on what it is that you're doing? Are they formulating opinions on what it is you're doing? This morning, I sent out a social media post because the face of poverty in the U.S. has changed dramatically. And so the Sally Struthers, having the child on the corner with dirt on his face, that's not going to work anymore in the U.S. because what it is now is economic insecurity. It's the fact that people can't afford their houses. It's the fact that they've got, 3-4 times the debt that they have income. And so what it means to be impoverished in the U.S. is totally different than what it meant Do people understand that? Or are they still expecting to see that child in the corner in the street? And if they are, you need to know that. If you're working with schools, there's so much going on with schools right now. How are those opinions and things changing? If they're using products of yours, how are they using the products? Another great example I read was there was a group, Acumen. If you haven't looked up Acumen, they're a social impact investor. Look them up. They were investing in malaria nets. And they assumed, okay, if we make X number of nets, we've saved X number of lives. We've done the research. So if this many people buy nets, we've saved this many lives. And that's what they told people. And this was early on, they say. They're doing much better about it now. But they went out and did a field research. And what they found is people were using these nets for soccer goals. They were using these nets for fishing nets, which was problematic because the nets were treated with chemicals. They were killing fish and messing with the ecosystem. So clearly it was not having the impact that they thought it was. Now, this was a year later, though. So being insular, they did the case studies, they did the research. Okay, we're saving millions and millions of lives. But when they got out and actually saw how it was being used, that wasn't the case. There was also an article about equipment that was going out to Africa, medical equipment that would get to stick. It would be unused. Why? Because when they did their field research 2 years later, they found the equipment's too difficult to repair. We're sending it out there, but people aren't actually able to repair it. So once it breaks, they just throw it away. They stick it on the side and it becomes a TV stand, right? So I say all that to say, if you're stuck, if you feel like you're not moving, you cannot do change in a vacuum. So it's getting out, talking to people, seeing how they're using it, seeing how they're formulating opinions. A stakeholder map is the tool I would suggest here. So really sitting down and seeing who all is using or indirectly benefited and directly benefited by what we're doing. Get that out. A mind map would be another way to do this. And then start engaging with those people, right? Talking to them, co-creating with them. They should be helping you develop any type of donor campaign, product, service, grant, not grant agreement, application, I forget what you call it, proposal, any type of pitch that you do as a business. All of that stuff should be in co-creation with the folks that you're engaging with. If not, you're in isolation and you're probably missing the boat on some valuable insight. I myself am actually trying to do much better about this in terms of getting feedback from you all, especially the ones that I've worked with, to make sure that I'm still resonating and whatever your problems are, that I'm being responsive to those. So there's that. So that's it. I talked really fast because it was a lot of information. But so ways to diagnose how you may be getting stuck. You're too ephemeral. The book to read is Made to Stick by Chip or Dan Heath, or Big Ideas by Tom Peter. Get out, see how people are engaging with it, and really focus on grounding your work. Fear of failure may be another way. The book to read is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. The tool is to do some type of rapid prototyping. So get something out and continue to iterate on it. If it's no clarity, then the book is A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. And the tool is visualization. Really sitting down and what is the ideal? What is my ideal day? What is the ideal day for programming? What is the ideal for us in 10 years? Where are we at? What building are we in? What are we doing? Who are we working with? Who's funding us? Really getting specific about that. If it's that it's compulsory and you're not passionate, the tool is a values assessment. What is it that I'm really passionate about? What do I like to do? What matters to me? Reframing the work so it falls within that. And then the book is The Progress Principle, Using Small Wins to Ignite Joy, Engagement, and Creativity at Work. I don't think I mentioned some of these books. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm seeing the chats now. And they're like, what's the book? So that's what that is. Shame and Worthiness. The book is Daring Greatly or Rising Strong by Brene Brown. The tool is her reckoning tool in Rising Strong. So really getting clear on what our feelings are. I know if you want to use another word, where am I at? Do whatever you need to do. Just do the exercise. Getting curious and then watching against barriers. If it's decorating the tree, you've just thrown everything at the tree. The tool is mind mapping. Get it. If you're going to throw it out on paper. And then the book is Lean Impact or Running Lean by Ash Moria. Sorry, I pronounced that wrong. Prune Your Tree is the exercise. And then isolation is the book is Thanks for the Feedback or Tribes. I don't think I mentioned that one either, by Seth Godin. The tool is a stakeholder map. And the exercise is just to make sure that you're out there doing some field research. So I have a couple of questions. I don't have time to answer all of them, but I see one that I think, based on who I see on the attendee list, would be relevant for all of you. And that's, what do you do if you're overwhelmed and have a small, and please do send questions through if you have them, because I can answer one more, I think. What do you do if you're overwhelmed and have a small team or resources in terms of being stuck? Very good question, because I have a small team and resources as a bootstrapper. Leverage. I have been so excited because I've seen so many more of my clients learn the true power of leveraging. And I understand we all want to have creative control over what it is we're doing. And there's ways to do that. There's joint venture agreements. There's fiscal sponsor arrangements. There's co-venture partnerships. I mean, there's different things that we can do that create vehicles and containers for the way that we want to engage with others. But the key is, you can't all do it yourself. So who can you leverage that can? And leveraging in a way that isn't exploitive. So it's not, I'm going to use you to get to this, but I have something to lend to you and you have something to lend to me. So is it, if I need help with marketing, is it you partnering up nonprofit, or you partnering up business with the tourism board or other folks who are in that space, and allowing them, maybe educating them on some of the trials and tribulations that you're encountering, some of the cool things that are going on in the city that they may not be aware of. And then in return for that, having them market what you're doing to an incredibly large base of people. Is it, if you need volunteers, is it working with a church or some other religious or spiritual or civic organization? Again, it may be that you have a skill set or an opportunity, or you have assets, people, a network that you can leverage. For them, you can make introductions, and then in turn, they have volunteers that they can lend you. So something I tell a lot of people, we don't think enough about our assets, right? So we think of money as an asset, and it is, and it's an amazing asset, and I would like more of that. But there are also things that we have, expertise, people we know, places we've been, introductions that we can make. It could be rooms, it could be facilities, it could be spaces, it could be any number of things. And so I always have clients sit down and really just list, it's gone by, really just list, what are the assets that you have? And then how can you leverage those? Who is it that may be needing those assets? And then leverage those for them. So I connected, for example, one client who had empty space with another nonprofit that was kind of in her vertical. And because I knew if I can get them in the same space, they'll talk and they'll have some synergy. And sure enough, she had this space that she could lease. So she was making money for it, minimal, it wasn't much, but she was making a little bit of money from it. But she also had this woman who needed space, but was also in the vertical of her space. And so not only were they able to lend each other something, she had space, she had the money to be able to rent the space, but they're also working together programmatically, right? So leverage whatever it is that you may not necessarily have. And then what are the steps if you're doing something new and not even clear on the next steps? If that's the case, let's say you're doing a brand new donor campaign, or you're working with an entirely new foundation, research, and mind map it all out, honestly. Because in doing that, when you have that 50,000 foot view, I promise you're going to start to see some things maybe connect, or opportunities for you to leverage that you would have never seen if you were looking at it from a very straight perspective. So if you're working on something new and you feel stuck, it's probably because you don't have a good enough sense of where you are. So pan out and really get some clarity, or not even clarity, explore. I wouldn't even say clarity. Yeah, I wouldn't even say clarity, because clarity would be you refining and kind of coming in, converging, diverge, right? So pan out and really understand, where does this foundation fit in the ecosystem? What conversations are they having? How does my organization fit with those conversations? Same if you're approaching a business or a sponsor. If you're a business yourself and you're approaching an investor, or you're wanting to work with a nonprofit reciprocally, how does the work that I'm doing fit into the greater conversation? And then from there, I think you'll find opportunities that you can leverage using some of these other tools to be able to move forward. So it's 12:44. I promise to get you out by 12:45. Yay! Thank you so much, guys, for joining. If you have questions, email them, shoot them to me in the AE community. Join that. I'll be answering questions then, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to hang out with me. You guys have a good holiday. Bye.